I cheated on my husband. And I don't regret it. I never thought I'd be the type of woman to cheat. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. I had it all, or at least, I thought I did. A perfect house in the suburbs, 2 beautiful kids, and a husband, Jake, who worked hard to provide for us. But here's the thing no one tells you about having it all: sometimes, it feels like nothing at all. It started small. A glance here, a touch there. I'd tell myself it was innocent, just a bit of harmless fun. But deep down, I knew better. I met him at work. His name was Ryan. Tall, confident, with that effortless charm that Jake had long since lost under the weight of mortgages and late-night emails. It didn't happen overnight. At first, it was just coffee breaks, inside jokes, texts that lingered a little too long. I convinced myself I was just enjoying attention, something I hadn't felt in years. Jake and I had become roommates. We didn't fight, we didn't talk, we just existed in the same space, raising kids, paying bills. But Ryan? He looked at me like I was someone. Like I was more than a mom with a messy bun and yesterday's yoga pants. And one night, when Jake was away on a business trip, I stopped convincing myself it was innocent. I planned everything. The babysitter. The dinner. The outfit. I told myself it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. One night turned into 2. 2 turned into weekends when Jake was too busy to notice I was gone a little too long. I thought I'd feel guilty. I thought I'd hate myself. But the truth? I didn't. I felt alive. Every touch, every stolen moment felt like a piece of me I'd lost along the way. I felt wanted. Needed. And it wasn't just about the physical part, it was about feeling seen. But secrets have a way of creeping into your life, and it didn't take long for Jake to notice the late nights, the sudden attention to my hair, the way I'd pull away when he tried to touch me. One night, he confronted me. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked at me and said, "Is there someone else?" And I couldn't lie. I nodded. And just like that, the perfect life I had built, the life I wasn't sure I even wanted anymore, crumbled. Jake packed a bag that night and left without another word. The silence in the house was deafening. And as I sat there, alone with my thoughts, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. No more pretending. No more faking smiles. Just truth. People ask if I regret it. The easy answer is yes. But the real answer? No. Because sometimes, you have to break something to realize it was never whole to begin with. And now, standing here in the wreckage of my old life, I finally understand that the worst thing I ever did might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. I cheated on my husband. And I don't regret it. Part 2. After Jake left, the silence in our house was unbearable. The kids were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that their world had just shifted in a way they wouldn't fully understand for years. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, half expecting Jake to walk back through the door and demand an explanation. But he didn't. He was gone. And then it hit me. I had no idea what came next. I'd spent so much time wrapped up in the affair, in the fantasy of it all, that I never thought about what would happen when reality caught up. Ryan? Yeah, he was there, at first. He texted, called, even came over once to check on me. But something felt off. The thrill of sneaking around was gone, and with it, so was the spark between us. Our conversations turned awkward, forced. I realized that what we had was never meant to survive the light of day. It was built on stolen moments and whispered lies, and without them, it didn't stand a chance. I remember the night I told him it was over. We were sitting in his car outside my house. He looked at me with those same eyes that once made me feel alive, but now they just made me feel empty. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hand resting on mine. And I was. I nodded, thanked him for whatever it was we had, and walked away. He didn't chase me. He didn't beg. He just watched me go, and in that moment, I knew we were both relieved. The next few weeks were a blur of questions from friends and awkward conversations with family. Everyone wanted to know what happened. We just grew apart, I'd say, dodging their pitying looks. No one suspected the truth. No one asked if I cheated. And I never volunteered the information. Jake, on the other hand, wasn't so quiet. He moved into an apartment downtown, and word got around fast. My phone buzzed one night with a text from our mutual friend, Laura. "Jake's out with someone tonight. Thought you should know." I stared at it for a long time. And you know what? I felt nothing. No jealousy, no regret. Just, nothing. I had let him go long before he ever knew I was gone. The kids were the hardest part. Explaining to a 6-year-old why Daddy wasn't coming home every night broke me in ways I didn't expect. "Did I do something wrong?" my daughter, Emily, asked me one night, clutching her stuffed bunny like it could hold all her worries. "No, sweetie," I whispered, holding her close. "Sometimes grown-ups just need space." Space. That's what I told myself I needed too. Space to figure out who I was without Jake, without Ryan, without the labels of wife and mother dictating my every move. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I focused on me. I signed up for a yoga class. I reconnected with friends I'd pushed away during the affair. I took myself out to dinner, sat alone at a restaurant, and realized I didn't mind my own company. It felt good. And then one night, Jake called. His voice was calm, steady. "We should talk," he said. I agreed. We met at a quiet diner halfway between our new lives, and for the first time in a long time, we were honest with each other. "I should have been there more," he admitted, stirring his coffee. "And I should have told you how I felt before it was too late," I said back. We didn't cry. We didn't fight. We just talked. And when the check came, he looked at me and asked, "Do you regret it?" I thought about lying, about telling him what he wanted to hear. But instead, I shook my head. "No, I don't." "Do you?" He smiled, the kind of tired smile you give when you finally accept something you can't change. "I regret that we let it get to that point," he said. And that was it. There were no grand declarations, no promises to try again. Just two people who once loved each other, sitting in a diner, realizing it was over. That night, I walked out into the cold air, took a deep breath, and felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't regret it. Because in losing everything, I finally found myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth it. I cheated on my husband. And I don't regret it. Part 3. After that conversation with Jake, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was moving forward. There was no grand epiphany, no sudden burst of clarity, but little by little, I started piecing myself back together. Divorce papers came a few months later. No drama, no lawyers fighting over assets. We signed them in the living room of the house we once called ours, sitting across from each other at the same kitchen table where we used to laugh, argue, and plan our future. It was strange how something so life-altering could feel so mundane. When it was done, Jake stood up, hesitated for a moment, then hugged me. It wasn't one of those long, emotional hugs you see in movies. Just a simple, quiet goodbye. "Take care of yourself, Allie," he said, and I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. And just like that, I was officially a divorced woman. At first, it felt liberating. No more pretending, no more guilt. I could finally be whoever I wanted to be. But the truth is, when you spend so many years defining yourself as someone's wife, someone's mom, it's hard to remember who you were before all of it. I started dating again. Friends pushed me into it before I was ready, setting me up with guys they swore were perfect for me. There was Mark, the accountant who wouldn't stop talking about his ex-wife. Then there was Eric, the gym junkie who thought deep conversation meant debating protein shakes. None of it felt right. And then there was Ben. I met him at a bookstore downtown, of all places. I was flipping through a self-help book I had no intention of buying when he walked up next to me and said, "That one's a scam." They all are. I laughed, surprised by his confidence. He had this easy smile, the kind that makes you feel comfortable instantly. We talked for almost an hour, standing there between the shelves, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark that wasn't born out of guilt or secrecy. Our first date was simple, coffee and a walk through the park. I told him everything. About Jake. About Ryan. About how I wasn't looking for anything serious. He didn't flinch. "I'm not asking for serious," he said, "I'm just asking for real." And real is exactly what it was. Ben wasn't perfect, but he was honest. He didn't play games, didn't try to fix me. He just showed up. And I realized that's what I'd been missing all along, someone who didn't make me feel like I had to be anything other than myself. Meanwhile, Jake moved on too. He started dating a woman named Hannah, and when I met her at one of the kids' school events, I was surprised by how nice she was. Younger, prettier, yes, but kind. She smiled at me like she understood more than she let on, and for the first time, I didn't feel jealous. Just grateful that Jake had found someone who fit into his life in a way I no longer could. One night, while tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at me and asked, "Mom, are you happy now?" I paused, stroking her hair, and thought about it. About all the pain, the mistakes, the regrets that somehow didn't feel like regrets anymore. "Yeah, sweetie," I whispered. "I think I am." And I meant it. Life didn't turn out the way I thought it would. It was messier, more complicated, and full of mistakes I couldn't take back. But in the end, I found myself. And that made it all worth it. I cheated on my husband. And I don't regret it. Part 4. Months passed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt steady. Not wildly happy, not drowning in regret, just steady. And after everything, that felt like a victory. Ben and I kept things light. No pressure, no expectations. We'd go out for dinner, take weekend hikes, and sometimes just sit in his apartment, watching terrible reality shows and laughing at how ridiculous they were. He never pushed for more, and I think that's why I liked him so much. He let me breathe. But there were moments, quiet ones, where the weight of my choices crept back in. Like when I dropped the kids off at Jake's new place and see how perfectly put together Hannah was, standing there with her effortless smile and fresh-baked cookies. Or when Emily would say things like, "I miss how it used to be," and I'd have to swallow the guilt threatening to bubble up. I was moving on, but some parts of me were still stuck in the past. One night, after a long day at work, I found myself parked outside Jake's apartment. The lights were on, and through the window, I could see them, him and Hannah, sitting on the couch with the kids, laughing at something on TV. It hit me then, he was happy. Happier than he'd been with me in years. I wasn't sure why I was crying. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was regret. Or maybe it was just the final acceptance that we were really over. I drove home and called Ben. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He showed up 20 minutes later, no questions asked, just sat next to me on the couch, held my hand, and let me fall apart for a little while. "You're allowed to feel this way," he said gently, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "Letting go is messy." And he was right. It wasn't just about letting go of Jake, it was about letting go of who I thought I was supposed to be. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. I made breakfast for the kids, danced around the kitchen to songs they rolled their eyes at, and finally let myself laugh without forcing it. Maybe I wasn't the perfect mom, or the perfect ex-wife, but I was showing up. And that was enough. But then, life has a way of testing you. A few weeks later, Jake called. It was late, too late for anything casual. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tense. I braced myself. "What's wrong?" "Hannah knows." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Knows what?" "About us. About everything." His voice was strained, and I could practically hear him pacing through the phone. Apparently, Hannah had found an old message. Something I thought I had deleted. Something that spelled out everything in black and white. She wasn't just angry, she was hurt. And now, Jake was standing at the edge of losing something good, all because of me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, guilt hitting me all over again. "Yeah," he sighed. "Me too." We didn't say much else. There wasn't much to say. After I hung up, I sat there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling that familiar ache creep back in. No matter how far I thought I'd come, the past had a way of showing up when I least expected it. The next morning, I texted Jake, "Tell her the truth. She deserves that." And he did. Hannah stayed, but things were different between them after that. I could see it in the way she looked at me at school events, polite but distant. I couldn't blame her. That's the thing about cheating. It doesn't just end when you walk away. It lingers, leaving cracks in places you never expected. But I was done running from it. Done trying to make sense of something that, deep down, I always knew was wrong. Instead, I focused on what was ahead. I poured more into my kids, into myself. I took a promotion at work, started traveling a little, and even signed up for a painting class, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. And Ben? He was still there, steady as ever. One night, we were lying on my couch, and he turned to me and asked, "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" I thought about it, about everything that word meant, and finally said, "I don't know. But I do know I don't want to live my life in regrets anymore." He smiled. "Then you're already doing better than most people." And for the first time in years, I believed it. I cheated on my husband. And I don't regret it. Final chapter. Time passed, and with it, the raw edges of my mistakes softened into something I could live with. Life didn't pause to give me time to figure things out, it just kept going. Jake and I settled into a rhythm. We weren't friends, not really, but we were good co-parents. We'd exchange polite smiles at soccer games, have brief but civil conversations during drop-offs, and slowly, the weight of the past started to feel less heavy. Hannah and I never really recovered from the fallout. She was kind, but guarded, like she was holding a piece of herself back every time we were in the same room. I understood. She didn't need to forgive me, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. Some things just are what they are. As for me, I kept moving forward. Slowly, carefully, but forward nonetheless. The affair, the divorce, the endless self-questioning, it had all shaped me into someone different. Not better, not worse. Just, different. Ben stuck around longer than I thought he would. I think, deep down, I kept expecting him to get tired of my baggage, to realize I wasn't as exciting or put together as he might have thought at first. But he didn't. He stayed. And over time, I stopped questioning why. One evening, as we sat on my back porch watching the kids chase fireflies across the yard, he turned to me and said, "You know, you don't have to keep punishing yourself, Allie." I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. "Who says I am?" He just looked at me, the way only someone who really sees you can, and I knew he was right. So I stopped. I let myself be happy. I let myself believe that it was okay to move on, to love again, even if I had made mistakes before. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, for some karmic punishment to come knocking on my door. Because here's the thing, life is messy. People make choices they can't take back, and sometimes they break things that can't be fixed. But life goes on. And if you're lucky, if you're really lucky, you get a chance to make something new out of the wreckage. Jake remarried Hannah a year later, and when I dropped the kids off at their wedding weekend, I didn't feel bitterness or jealousy, just a quiet kind of acceptance. I even sent them a bottle of wine with a note that said, "Congratulations. Wishing you both happiness." And I meant it. As for me and Ben, well, we're still figuring things out. We took a trip to California last summer, just the two of us, and I realized something somewhere between the beach sunsets and lazy mornings in bed. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of being alone. Not of starting over. Not even of the mistakes I'd made. One night, he asked me again, "Do you think you'd ever want to do it again? Marriage, I mean." I didn't hesitate this time. "Maybe," I said, smiling. "But not because I have to. Because I want to." And that's where I am now. No grand revelations, no fairy tale endings. Just a woman who made mistakes, owned them, and learned how to live with them. So do I regret it? No. Not anymore. Because I finally understand that life isn't about getting everything right, it's about learning from the times you don't.